Hello, my name is Gabriel Newton, and for my capstone project, I will be talking about a case study of Milwaukee's brownfield redevelopment. No matter where you live, chances are you have seen an abandoned lot in your area. Usually these are industrial, but it could be residential as well. These brownfields used to be common in Milwaukee. However, through initiatives that Milwaukee has placed in the past 30 years, redevelopment is more common than ever. But within all this, I believe there are patterns to be found and signs to be researched. As such, I want to focus on what Milwaukee has done to redevelop and why. I also want to analyze any patterns and see if there is anything for future study lying within them. So let's look into the history of these brownfields. Primarily, these have been abandoned factories within Milwaukee's most historic districts. However, households can also find themselves abandoned or dilapidated. It's hard to say why these older industries were abandoned, as there has not been much historical research into why. However, newer places that have found themselves to be titled brownfields are usually because of an inability to maintain safety codes and an inability to repair, leaving them uninhabitable. But let's look at the social context, because in reality, these brownfields are extremely dangerous to the communities that surround them. First, on a physical level, it can depend on the structural integrity of any building still on these lots. If one is to fall, it could cause serious damage to both the lot itself as well as anything surrounding it. Second, it can be unhealthy for the surrounding communities based off of any chemicals or toxins that still lie within the building, either on the surface level or seeped into the soil and groundwater, polluting any nearby vegetation. Third, it's just simply bad for the market. Nobody wants to buy a house that is next to the abandoned factory, and unfortunately, these ugly aesthetics can just be blights, as well as the fact of the previous two issues. So let's talk about the literature. According to Milwaukee sources, over the past 30 years, the city has invested $21.7 million in loans and grants to the process of remediating and redeveloping brownfields. In order to qualify for these funds, developers have to show that the money given will go to the direct process of removing pollutants from the plot in question. The requirements also mention a prioritization towards industrial and commercial projects that will bring money into the city, or residential projects with an affordable housing component. Furthermore, in order to understand the process of remediation and revitalization and why Milwaukee has put so much money into it, we must look at O'Connor and Ho's work, Sustainable Remediation and the Revival of Brownfields. Many types of cleanup are possible, but it can depend on what types of chemicals are in the plot and whether they are relatively surface level or have seeped into the soil or groundwater. These varieties of cleanups have different price tags attached, as well as having different readiness and availability. Something like in situ chemical reduction, in which chemicals with a tendency to absorb toxins or otherwise change them into something more stable, is a fairly common yet fairly expensive approach. However, microbial reduction, the process of using microorganisms to consume toxins, is much cheaper but is much less likely to get every type of toxin. The purpose of this project is to compare and contrast recent redevelopment projects within the city of Milwaukee. As such, specific examples will be used in a case study approach. These cases come from two specific areas. The first come from the projects advertised and boasted by Milwaukee's official sources, due to the fact that any developers who come in and look and are expecting to develop within Milwaukee will use these as an example of what Milwaukee is most wanting. The second are projects that garner media attention due to the fact that if the community has praise or they have issues, they are most likely for a reason and will go straight to the media. Obviously, within these case studies, I want to ask a few questions. What were they before versus and are they now? Are these projects primarily shifting or are they staying the same? Are they harmonious with the community? Does the community agree with them? And does the aesthetic of these two buildings agree? Lastly, on the topic of media attention, is it positive or negative? Is there a lot of media attention or is it only like one or two news articles? Which is more helpful in that regard? Within these examples come three succinct categories that each project seems to fall neatly into. The first is industrial sites that turned into commercial or further industrial sites. The second is residential sites that turned into commercial or industrial sites. The last is industrial that turned residential. These are sorted by most to least common, left to right. Starting with industrial turned commercial, these sites generally follow the same pattern. An abandoned factory or similar in one of the industrial centers of Milwaukee that quickly turned into something like a small coffee shop or a tourist attraction. The purpose is to bring money into the city and the businesses that run them. These are generally well liked by the community and are fairly harmonious with the areas due to the similar revitalization of the industrial complexes around them. They tend to not garner much media attention, however, due to the general ambiguity and ambivalence of the projects. Nothing is bad about what they do, but they are not breaking boundaries, except in the cases where projects bring a needed service to the community, such as the Heart Love Place Hospital. The next most common is residential turned commercial. These projects can have volatile reactions from the community and the media. On the one hand, they can bring much needed services to neighborhoods, such as the small animal hospital and the Sherman Park Community Center, as well as bonuses to the housing market. However, residential brownfields are a very recent thing and commonly affect lower class neighborhoods. Many are evicted from their homes, deemed uninhabitable, in order for these new projects to be built. Which brings into question the issue of the least common category, the industrial turned residential. While these projects do exist throughout Milwaukee, such as the North End Housing Plan in the 3rd Ward, the affordable housing components are small and insignificant compared to the grandiose apartments and studios geared towards millennials wanting to live in the city. Of course, these small, insignificant affordable housing components bring large positive media attention for how much the city needs them. However, many are left wondering where the rest of the affordable housing can come from, especially when those who were just evicted can't find a new place. This also leaves a strange fourth category that is completely missing: residential turned into residential. There are no documented redevelopment projects of this sort in Milwaukee, and can leave one wondering if the housing priorities of Milwaukee are really as important as they say they are. Redevelopment is something that shows positive signs for Milwaukee. Many of these plots could have stood there for years as the city expanded, but instead, these initiatives have turned some of the city's worst neighborhoods into some of the best. However, the fact remains that more work needs to be done on the residential aspect before Milwaukee can be proud of its redeveloping nature. When the biggest issue is still not tackled, there is no point for the countermeasures.